Okay, welcome back to part two, one step away from discussing the topic of mental health. I just want to say once again, thank you very much to the viewers who are listening. We are always trying to learn and build ourselves up, and hopefully we can build you up as well, and you can build us back up too. I will encourage you lot to please comment. We want to hear what you have to say. You are vital to our motivation here. Okay? Please subscribe if you enjoy what we do, and please share to other people who you feel may benefit from what we talk about and from what we say. Once again, our platform is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much. Okay, boys. Okay, so we left the first part. We're stepping into some more in-depth discussion now. I want to jump straight in with this. This is question 3, which states, what contributes to the disproportionality in diagnosis and disposal? Disposal meaning how are you reacted upon by a systematic society of Black people within the UK? I'll say that one more time. What contributes to the disproportionality in diagnosis and disposal of Black people in the UK? Before I drop it onto the group, I want to say this. I had a conversation with a personality disorder professional, and I asked her these questions around what is it when it comes to Black people being disproportionately diagnosed and given treatment for mental health issues and detained under the Mental Health Act. Quite surprisingly, this personality disorder professional was unsure. This is a very unresearched field. The stats are there, but in terms as to why, it's unresearched. However, what she did say was this, that there could possibly be a history. Well, not possibly, sorry. She said, as a rule of thumb, history of trauma has a strong link to the likelihood of developing mental health issues. I'll say this one more time. This came from a personality disorder professional who I had a conversation with. This was an unresearched field, and she stated, history of trauma has a strong link to the likelihood of developing mental health issues. So on that basis, boys, what do you want to jump in with?
Well, I think we all know what that history of trauma is. Do
the listeners?
Well, that's what I was going to come to. Okay, we're going down that route. First and foremost, I want to make it clear to the listeners, like when we say disproportionate, like I was looking at some mental health statistics, so for between 2018 and 2019. So it says Black African Caribbean are of that descent are 4 times more likely or over when it comes to detention or being detained, 4 times more likely, and 8 times more likely to be given treatment, like it's called, I think it's called CTO, so community treatment order. So basically where there's been intervention through, I guess, an organization, correct me if I'm wrong, or leave it in the comments. Guys, what we have to understand is, and within the UK, when it comes to the amounts of Black people, it only equates to around about 3, maybe 4 now, 3 or 4% of the whole UK. In the UK, there's probably around about, I don't know, obviously the census can change, but from between 2 to 3 million people in the UK, Black people, 2 to 3 million as a ballpark figure are in the UK. In comparison to obviously white counterparts and maybe Asian, but what I'm trying to say is that 3% of the UK, but when you look at the statistics in terms of people being diagnosed or people being detained or being in detention or being given CTO, community treatment, something is clearly wrong. Like that, the numbers are just too different.
It's crazy, man.
You know what I'm saying? So my point is the trauma, and I know people might think, oh, you're always talking about it. Think about 400 years of being enslaved. I'm going to ask the listeners a question. Do you think, so you guys that are hearing me right now, do you think at any point of those 400 years, those generations, or let's just use a period, someone's lifetime in slavery, do you think at any point they would have felt negative mental health, whether that be depression, anxiety, and on top of that, even negative physical health? I know
That's
what
such a hard question, man.
well, it's not really
Hard, not in terms of
well,
hard to get, but hard as in that's just a body bag, man.
this is what I'm trying to say, because any person listening, I hope, would understand that the answer is going to be like, if you're kind of doing things against your will, but I guess after a while you think it's not against your will, but if you're doing something and your father's done it, your grandfather's done it, your kids are having to do it, you're seeing, I'll give an example. Just imagine, if you're a man, if you just imagine seeing someone, or a slave owner or a plantation owner, taking your woman, looking you in the eye, smiling, knowing that they're about to kind of rape your missus. And there's nothing, for the most part, I'm sure there's people that would have fought,
rape you,
but there's nothing that you can actually really do about it. That's not going to harm your life. That's just one example. Just imagine seeing your kids taken away. Oh, nope, they're more valuable in this plantation. We've sold your child to go and work over there.
Brother, that happens so often from the top. The mother just gave birth, but because that baby is also the property of the master can sell that baby from birth. Do you understand how traumatic that is for the female experiencing that?
That's what I'm saying, Kay. So
after carrying that child.
So I'm saying all of that to say this. Within those hundreds of years, this isn't just like a 2-year period or even a 6-year period of other traumatic events for other nations. For that long, those things happen. So we understand, and I'm sure the listeners understand, if that happened to us, or if it happened to you who's listening, that would be traumatic for you. Now, if you're in that situation and there's no intervention and there's no treatment, because remember, we're not classed as humans, so we're expected to kind of just get on with it. If there's been no intervention, and it does go back into the Dr. DeGroy post traumatic slave syndrome, but I'm just speaking from the heart. If you are going through all of that over that amount of years, and it's passed on from generation to generation with no therapy, no treatment, no addressing the situation, no healing, you can understand why the disproportion comes. And going back to what Kay said about kind of I can't remember the person that you said, but someone that's obviously, the answer that they gave was, it may be because of historical trauma. That is our historical trauma. Even when slavery was quote unquote abolished, we still had to go through trauma. And to this present day, whether we're physically seeing it on the television, or we're having to experience it, as everyone's heard our experiences over the last 8 podcasts, you can understand that there's certain traumas that are just not going away. On top of cultural impacts and maybe just how we're supposed to deal with it, if you're in slavery and you're told like you can't show weakness because obviously the master's not going to be happy, or if you're getting whipped because you're not working hard enough and there's nothing you can do about it, so what do? If you can't complain, you just have to get on with it. So if that filters down through to generations, we just get on with it. We can't complain. So maybe there's a part of our brain where we're just used to that mentality of, you know what, we've got to be strong because no one's going to hear us anyway. So the disproportion comes from the fact, for me anyway, or why is such a thing? And when I'm looking at all these stats and figures, and even on summaries, it always brings up that there's a disproportion for Black descendants or Black heritage. I wonder why. It's historical.
Brother, I don't want people to overlook what you said. There's a gem. There's many gems you dropped there, but there's a gem I just want to make more prominent. Maybe we be quiet and don't say anything because people are not going to hear us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That is so prominent, Because what happens is we talked about signs, right, in the first part, signs of behavior that could indicate emotional uh, issues, mental health issues. Now, if that behavior that comes out is then diagnosed or disposed of as a behavioral issue, rather than there's a mental health issue behind that behavior, then you are disposed of as a criminal. That might be why 40% of Black people access the mental health services through police or the criminal justice system. It has to take enforcement, removal of choice, which was also part of our trauma historically, removal of choice, and is still being used to this day in order to what? Treat us. Because we're incapable of choosing. And you touched on something, maybe because we don't choose to enter that same system. Remember, people, this is the same system that has treated us in the past like dirt and is currently treating us like dirt. We've got to go back to the same system to try and get healed. That's illogical. So maybe we won't talk. Maybe we won't speak. Maybe we will put on the false impressions because it's the same system that is treating us like dirt that we need to go to try and get help. Isn't that called Stockholm? Trying to be friends with the same thing that is hurting you. That's called Stockholm syndrome, mate. Very powerful
Sure.
there, Em.
Sure. When I saw this question, like it took me down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I literally writ down all the factors. So I mean, you guys can stop me if you want me to. There's so much here that I'm probably going to touch on some of yours, so I'm just going to mention the names.
That's fine,
and if
We're all
you want me to expand on it, we can. The first one I had was what you guys just spoke of, which I say kind of comes under institutional racism. All right?
Go on.
Which is kind of like what you lot just talked on. I put, there's also, because of that institutional racism, there will be a racial bias amongst the healthcare professionals that are providing these sorts of treatment, which also covers what you guys was talking about, which also filters in the police and how they deal with Black and ethnic minority people. According to a lot of the research, Black people tend to be more, have a propensity to abuse drugs and alcohol more, according to the research.
Sorry, Jay, just to kind of check you there, you mentioned about the police. We also just need to iterate that police have powers to arrest people based on the Mental Health Act and the certain sections. Yeah. But I'm sure we'll get onto that at some point. Sorry.
Yeah, they have the powers to detain and anyone they see fit. And the techniques of detaining people some people could argue it can be overuse of force, etc., unfair treatment, right? So like I said, there's research that indicates that Black people tend to abuse drug and alcohol more, which could be a leading factor to us having a disproportionate use of the mental health service. The whole thing now is marijuana causing psychosis, and it's more prevalent in Black people.
10 times more likely than their white counterparts in Black men compared to white men. 10 times more likely Black men are to experience psychosis.
And they do attribute a lot of that to marijuana use, or certain strains of marijuana. Let me be clear, certain strains of marijuana, the high THC, which is what is now popular amongst everyone. I also put stuff like environmental factors, low-income housing, single parent, bullying, also being a second-generation immigrant. So in terms of that...
Boy, that's a big one.
Yeah, so in terms of that, doing my research, I found out that children of second-generation immigrants, especially those who come from a hot climate and they are climatized in a cold climate, they tend to have a higher level of mental health problems, of mental health issues. There's disorders called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, which links into, you know, when it becomes winter time, a lot of Black people tend to get depressed, stuff like that.
I prefer winter, just saying.
Yeah.
Not according to the stats. Not according to the
Some
stats. You
people do.
you like the sunshine. Simple.
I'm not black
And
then.
finally, there's also a correlation between mental health issues and a lack of vitamin D in Black and ethnic minorities. There's no hard evidence, but there seems to be a correlation. So yeah, these are just some of the stuff that I found in my research that were the causes or the reasons for there being to be a disproportionate number of Black people accessing the mental health service, like you said, Kay, 10 times more, and it's mostly through the judicial system, the police or the prison system or stuff like that.
See, this
What, to
is
say
not making
more?
sense. This is not making sense. Like, I was just thinking about it. So, just for clarity, like everyone, no matter what skin color you are, what culture you are, people have mental health issues. There's don't think you can say factual, but what we're trying to say is that there's a group of people that are for certain types of mental health issues, for example, depression, where we're less likely to get help for it. So we're not saying that we're the only ones that suffer, whatever, but it doesn't make, to me, I'm just trying to work it out. So there's certain aspects, or for a lot of mental health issues, we're less likely to get help for it because of those historical kind of generational cultural things.
Yeah.
But
So
still the stats are saying that we're 4 times or 8 times more likely to still be in that system.
So for instance, let's take the scientific route in this. You know how the modern day science was born through the testing and practices of testing on Black slaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they thought we were 3/5 of a human or whatever. We didn't feel pain. We had a higher threshold for pain. So, I mean, all these things link into why we're hard suffering and we don't talk about it but genetically we have a higher threshold for pain. We can take more pain. So therefore, something mentally is not going to affect us as much. Something mentally is not going to affect us as much. You get what I'm saying? So imagine that's what's being taught through generations of medicine. So then a healthcare professional, not even the police, just a healthcare professional, they're going to look at the Black patient and their white patient in 2 different forms. If you're going on medicine and history, they're taught that Black people, we can take more.
So there's a more likelihood that they will not take into account the ailments that we might come to them with.
Exactly.
In the first place.
And that doesn't mean that they're racist, but that's what they're taught. Like, these practices are still taught today. This is their foundation of their learning. Do you get what I'm saying? So
that's a disconnect, isn't it? I'm gonna step back in a minute, but this is a subject that is just what I said to you guys at the start in terms of just those different correlations between me being, like I said, passionate, but someone saying that I'm aggressive or nasty or angry. So if that is the impression that we get for the certain attributes, strong attributes that we have as Black men or Black women, but other people, so the opposite words that I said at the start of this podcast, those words have only been thrown at me by people that are not of my color. Facts. So if we've got a lot of people in the medical field, but I guess counselors, therapy, like if you're going to someone that is trying to diagnose you and they're not of your color, and I'm not saying this is factual, but there probably is going to be a disconnect of understanding what's actually going on. Because if I'm speaking to them in a passionate way where I'm trying to get my point across, and they feel that they need to be defensive because they think that I'm being aggressive, how is there going to be a proper, clean diagnosis if someone's feeling threatened for whatever reason?
Can I make this statement? This is so key to everything that we do here, man. You made a definitely, you made a differentiation between you feeling that you're expressive. Someone else sees that you're aggressive. All it takes is for them to have a certain piece of professional documentation for them to be right. That's all it takes here. That's all it takes in the
regardless of
UK.
what you feel.
Regardless of what you feel, what you say, if someone's got a piece of paper because they went to university and they studied and
Or badge.
or badge because they've done 12 weeks training, yeah, suddenly what they say becomes right, and you are now incapable of assessing or judging your own self.
Or people fear for their life because, okay, they're being aggressive. And if you're in a position of authority that happens to have a gun, or maybe not even a gun if you're in the UK,
Or maybe a hammer.
Taser.
Or taser, exactly. T knows what I'm saying. Then that's how quickly lives can be ended
Or
because
needle.
or even that, because you're interpreting someone trying to express themselves in a certain way, and because maybe there's a disconnect between cultures, or not choosing to understand, because you feel threatened and because you have that piece of paper, which is, I guess, a law to say that you can shoot that other person because apparently your life was risked, even though a lot of times these people are unarmed. That's how quick. So I know we're going away. I'm going away from diagnosis and the medical field, but it all plays into itself because
All links in.
it's about assumptions and impressions and kind of the perceptions of black men and women. Even for women, like speaking for the sisters, like the whole kind of stigma or the whole kind of strong black women, this mantra that is there, that actually has as much as that can empower women, that has an effect on black women in the workplace. It has effect on black women in
That
general on the
has a
street.
negative effect on them. Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
And in the home too, because
100%.
what that is saying is you're not allowed to feel weak. You're not allowed to feel vulnerable, black woman. You must always fight up against anything that makes you feel weak and vulnerable because you're a strong black woman.
But it gives,
and it's hard to leave that at work when you go home as well.
And you disregard how you're feeling though.
Mm-hmm.
You disregard it.
But all these connotations, stereotypes, it's fine. Like we understand we understand what stereotypes are, and I guess even we probably watch certain comedies that play into certain stereotypes, and we can laugh about it because like we're human, you know what I mean? Like we can have like a different mindset and understand what's going on. But when this filters in to people's professions where you carry on that kind of thought of someone in your own profession, whether you be a position of power, in a political position, in a authoritative law enforcement position, or a medical position where you can just write something that says, you know what, we can control what that person does or whether they stay or come out of hospital. We have to be conscious of that, and we have to understand and educate that this is how quick we can be one step away from either death or being detained. As simple as that, or being entrapped in even in your own mind, or sometimes even in your own home.
That's big in the game.
Yep.
I just want to make a quick reference as well, because of this so-called ability to silence us when we feel a certain way because we're scared of what that might be perceived as by professionals or people who have power over us. What does that cause within us as a nation of people, knowing the stereotype or stereotypes exist in black men and black women? What does that cause within us emotionally?
Unrest.
But what do you, that's very true. That's very true. There's an unrest and an imbalance. However, don't we learn to oppress certain thoughts, feelings? Don't we learn to oppress what we really want to say and do in fear of what it might be seen as?
Yeah. Don't want to seem weak. So these things that have those sort of stigmas, we won't. We will just gloss over it, bury it deeper within us.
And that becomes a form of self-oppression. You're oppressing yourself of emotion for fear of the reaction. in this society in the UK,
Fear of rejection.
which does what? Increases the traumatic experiences, because you can never resolve something that you're not allowed to talk I am about, which means that issue stays present, and that can develop into a negative emotional outcome. It could develop into mental health issues, because you have to be quiet and show a certain face or act a certain way, for fear of, if you act a different way, well, police will come in and get you. And you will be treated as a mental health patient, and you will be treated as abnormal, when really you're just frustrated, man. When really you just want your voice heard.
Yep.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And I think it's quite crazy. I was watching this documentary, and basically they were saying how teenage gang members, nearly 80% of them suffered with PTSD, and they never ever had the chance to address it. Imagine being a young teenager walking around with weapons, with fear for your life. You've taken lives. You're running from the police. You know what I'm saying? And
Jay,
I don't think they've had time. I don't think they've had time in themselves when you live in that life
to even stop and think.
You stop and think. Thank you very much. There's everything, like literally, if you're living that life, it's day to day. Do you know what I mean? You can't plan a week ahead to say, "Oh, I'm going to take this time to book an appointment to talk to someone, or go for a walk in the park and just reflect on what my life's been like for the last 2 years." Like, it's almost like that opportunity is not there for you, and that's not just only in that walk of life either. That could be just being a full-time parent.
But I think that's for young. I looked into a study, and it is more crossing over to the US. But there was a study where there was a lot of the findings that I can't remember the guy's name was. I have to find it. I'll trying to add it to the links on YouTube. They talk about a lot of what the young black men talk about is about the loss of hope for the future, i.e., hopelessness. To why they suffer from mental health issues, and hopelessness is a trait of depression, right? So
and lack of positive outcomes.
Well, social what do they call them, determinants, like education. I think Jay mentioned about education, employment, environment. It's a whole mixing pot of it's hard to have positive mental health when you've got such a big mixing pot of things that are trying to bring you down one way or the other.
Well, that ties into, even though we might be 3 or 4% within our hub, the percentage within us is still higher than theirs. Like Kay said earlier, we're 10 times more likely. So we're 10 times more likely to be in these deprived situations, 10 times more likely to have lack of hopes because of where we live in, our environment, do you get me, education system, and all these things directly leads into why we're how many times more likely to only access help once we're in handcuffs. Once we're in chains, that's the only time that's the only time we can access it.
Yes,
which is crazy.
Yes, some powerful points there, brothers. T, did you want to come and give a little bit of insight here? I know we covered a whole breadth, man. We probably, what I mean, but always want to hear your voice, my man.
Do you know what? There was a lot of stuff
yes.
that was said there. And there was a few things I was picking up. I'm like, I'll talk about this one, I'll talk about that one. And then
man, take it.
it was covered up one or another.
I know that feeling.
Which is good, because we are on the same path. But there's something I wanted to touch on. You guys have touched on bits and pieces, but I just want to hone in on it just for the viewers and listeners, because I know there are people out there who go back to what M said and what KU said about the traumas. And once we start talking about slavery, they're like, oh, here we go again. It's always about slavery. I just want to bring it back to right now in this current climate. Right? Forget slavery, forget everything else. Let's talk about now. Right? When you are living in fear, not just for your life, but for job security, for housing, for, even if you got a job for equal opportunity in your workplace, how do you think that's got an impact on your mental health?
Mm-hmm.
When you're fighting all these battles around you. Now, from the first episode to now, we have talked about personal experiences, whether it be by law enforcement, by people in authority positions like teachers, etc., etc. We've had negative experiences, right? How do you think that impacts us? Because the basis of a good mental health state is positive endorphins, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So neurological, right? So if I don't have anything positive going on in my life, the only thing I have is a bag full of worries. Whether for me to get promotion, I need to work twice as hard as my counterpart.
That's
Right?
already
For me,
a stress. That's already a stress.
exactly. For me to get a job, I need to turn up in a three-piece suit, right? Looking the part. For me to get housing, I have to my other partner would have to say they're single to get on the property ladder the council way, or even to get a mortgage.
Saying.
I can't get a mortgage because, again, I don't have the right job that's paying me the right money to get a mortgage. I don't have any inheritance. We got robbed of that. People forget we're starting from nothing. Whereas some of our counterparts will have parents behind them who will say, don't worry about the deposit. We'll give you 40 grand for the deposit for the house. We don't have that.
Where's that coming from, fam? What history, what ancestral history do we have where we're coming from money from?
Listen, like
We've
I said,
literally been robbed by other nations and still getting robbed to this day.
Like I said, for me, I don't want to. It's there. We all know it's there. But I just want the viewers and listeners to, because I know there'll be some people out there like, oh, here we go. Forget all of that. Let's just stick to facts here, right now. That's happening right now. It's not my parents' fault. We're the second generation of, like Jay said, immigrants, right? They haven't worked here enough to amass money to have on the side. If they got a house, that's theirs. They don't have great grandparents who left them money. We know where that money came from, but that's another topic. That we don't have nothing. So just put yourself in our shoes, where me driving my car down the road could end in a stop and search, could end in police brutality, could end into worse things. Me having a genuine debate with someone could be perceived as aggression, and matters would escalate into police being called, and then you get sectioned and everything else. Simply
100%.
because you're trying to be heard. Let's take, for example, you're in a meeting, right? I've been in meetings sometimes at work, and I really want to say something, but I don't. Why? Because I don't want to be that, not just that guy. I don't want to be that black guy.
I hear that.
Right? That's got up and said something. And then now okay, I might upset someone, and because of that, my opportunities will be shut in front of me because I've upset someone hard.
Yo, T, that is, I'm sure we can all relate to that, and the viewers can relate to that too. And we all hit some very hard subjects on this, man. I just want to wrap this piece up here. We talked about perceptions. We talked about situations where we can be misunderstood and where we really mean a certain aspect, but other people who happen to have more prominence, more professionalism by qualification, more relevance by society standpoint to actually change what you really mean and your intention into something that they can diagnose or dispose of through criminal means. Now, what I do want to say is this. there's a aspect called systematic trauma, and I just want to jump into this. Systemic trauma. I just want to jump into this in terms of how it could add to or contribute to the disproportionality. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, which is a branch of the US Department of Health and Human Services, adopts a broader definition of traumatic experience as an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, and social emotional aspects. The definition that would include systemic trauma refers to harm that is caused to people by contextual features such as environments, institutions, poverty, racism, and other forms of discrimination and oppression. So these are all aspects that we've all literally talked into. We've all talked in all this systemic. We've actually stepped into a systemic trauma that is caused by powers that are beyond us. And this leads into us being diagnosed by those who have powers beyond us. It leads to us being misunderstood by those who have powers beyond us. Those nations who see themselves as better than us, who have actually treated each other better than us. And that's so hard to say that. It even goes into the school system. According to DEMI 2019, it states that exclusions from schools are disproportionately high for Black Caribbean pupils. And the research identified here shows that the reason why this could possibly be, it's not a guarantee, but there's some research which shows a possibility, is due to lack of cultural understanding and lack of awareness of racism and discrimination. So there could be a level of misunderstanding. Well, not could be. We are saying through our experiences and through what we've researched, there is a lack of misunderstanding, and therefore a disproportionate response to this misunderstanding. Cool. Thank you very much, boys.
But no, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, and jump in.
The misunderstanding is literally killing us, because
there you go.
Let me ask you guys, but also the viewers, just as like a little quick trivia. If you was to kind of have a stereotype of what medical conditions or health conditions that a Black person can have, what would you say?
Drugs and alcohol misuse, personality disorders, and
medical conditions.
Schizophrenia.
What's the most
diabetes?
common? There you go. You're hitting it now.
High blood pressure.
Anything else?
High blood pressure.
Exactly. You just talking about one particular aspect of mental health, depression. Depression can increase the chances of diabetes. Once again, I'll find where I found this information, of diabetes, high blood pressure, sexual dysfunction, substance abuse, and ultimately death. So all these things that is contributing to us not wanting to kind of seek help because of all the other stuff, but by us not doing that and maybe going to a greater fit of depression is actually harming our other health aspects, like diabetes, but other aspects of kind of us as people, which is ultimately killing us. So a lot of times there'll be jokes, oh, that's because they eat loads of this and loads of that, why they've got a diabetes. But actually, it can be because of a mental situation that's causing us to kind of have these types of diagnoses, if that's the word, but you guys understand. Yeah, it might be the word. That's killing us. That's what I'm trying to say. It's literally like us not being able to kind of, or feel free, or there being a disconnect because people are not diagnosing us properly or quick enough, or just there being a barrier between us wanting to because of trauma that we've kind of suppressed for such a long time. It's actually, so we're not only are we getting killed externally, we're killing ourselves internally because of the external original trauma.
So are you suggesting that physical and psychological are not actually separate aspects then? That a psychological deficit can then go on to create a physical deficit.
100%.
You
Yeah.
can't have one without the other.
Yep, that's true.
And I think that's a common misconception as well, that you might go in for an ailment physically, treat that ailment physically, but you might have been not able to do something for such a long time because of this ailment. Then there's going to be a mental consequence of that. And I
There
think
is a massive link.
that's overlooked.
There's a massive link to it. Like to give you a perfect example, have you ever heard of someone that goes into a hospital or they had a nagging pain on their back or their chest or something, and then they have scans, and then the doctor says, unfortunately, you've got cancer, you've got 2 months to live. And
Very
then
common. Very common.
their health literally plummets. From the moment they walk into the hospital, within 2 months, there's nothing. So what's happened here is your mental state then was the first one to receive the news. And because of that, your health then deteriorated rapidly before you actually got told you had cancer or you had 2 months to live. You were fine. You were walking and everything was fine. If you get my analogy.
Yes, man. Your analogy is clear cut. It's clear cut, because what you're saying is that knowledge of something, the mental state of yourself, has a direct impact on your physical self. And therefore, because of that, you can deteriorate at a much faster rate than if you didn't have knowledge of that. And you could even argue, would you have died as quick? Or would you have suffered so much if you wasn't told that? That's the next argument.
Exactly.
So
Right.
it's almost like, boy, this is deep. This is deep, boys. Oh my word. So me with my mind again. So adversely, could treatment for physical issues be resolved by a greater and positive emotional well-being?
Yes, there's been cases about that.
Yes.
So you can increase your survivability by having a positive. So if that's the case, if there's a systemic targeting of us by the statistics, that means that once again, it's not, boys, I can't even get it out of my mouth, man.
Let's look at it from another angle. You know how your mindset.
It's deep.
You know how your mindset is so powerful to where they say whatever you think you can achieve, you can, right? So if your mindset is telling you, listen, you can do this, you can do it. But also if your mindset is telling you you're a failure, guess what? You're also a failure.
But here's where it comes down to reality. You can tell yourself you're all well and good and that you're great and you're positive and all that stuff. But if you step out the door and that's not being reflected, then what's that going to do for your mental health? You're technically lying to yourself.
What I mean by
this is where you create.
Sorry, go on, Nims.
I was just going to say that's why it's important. This is why we are where we are, because stepping outside of that door, you need to have certain shields around you. When I step outside the door, I know what to expect. I know that there's going to be things that go against what my mind is telling me who I am and what I am and what I represent and what my people represent. So you need to have those mental shields. And some of those mental shields are support networks. Knowing that, okay, regardless of what's going on, I know I can come back to my support network and they'll understand. And so like I said, what I'm trying to say is just so addressing it, understanding and being conscious of some of your ailments or issues and whatnot. That's a shield. That consciousness is a shield. Sometimes people are not aware of it and conscious, and boom, like it's just hit him like a ton of bricks hit him and they don't know what's happened. And it's literally rock bottom, like literally. But if that consciousness of understanding, okay, there's an issue or something that I need to address, that's one shield. On top of other people being there to support you, that's then that just having those protective layers to where you can say, you know what, I'm not going to be broken. No matter what happens out when I step outside this door, no matter what society tries to throw at me, you're not going to break me, because these shields are too strong and powerful. And if one gets broken down, I've got another to surround it, or they can be replaced, or they're rehealable shields. And that's what I deem my situation is. I have a lot of shields and a lot of rehealable shields. So when these things do hit me, and I do get hit sometimes, it's very hard to get to the literally the core. To break me is to kill me. Then you've won. But other than
100%.
that, nah.
You beat me to it. That's exactly what I was about to say about, for example, you know, okay, how long it takes you to get to work. Yeah.
100.
And you know, if you leave your house at 8, there's going to be traffic at that junction or whatever else. There's school there. There's this there. So you prepare, right? You say, okay, I'll leave 7:45,
Mm-hmm.
right? You prepare for a journey.
You prepare.
It's the same principle. You are walking outside your door prepared, knowing these things are going to happen. You expect them. So it's not a shock. And rather than relying on their system, and I always say this, boys, let's build our own system as well.
That's that there, fam. Yeah.
We've already started by talking about
of course.
it.
I was just about to say that we've already started that. Like, even before we started these podcasts, we've already started that just by coping and getting through every day. Like, it's just about sharing that now.
100% sharing it with our viewers and linking with us, man. We're about this. Yeah. Okay, so I want to move on to the next question now. This would be almost a summarizing section. We've mentioned this throughout the whole podcast. However, just to specify and focus it down a little bit, the next question asks, what are the outcomes for those that are diagnosed and disposed of through the mental health pathways? I'll ask that one more time. What are the outcomes for those that are diagnosed and disposed of through mental health pathways?
Well, I think if you look at the statistics, the outcomes are not great because of those same factors that came up in the previous question.
Mm-hmm.
They are the reason why the outcomes are so poor for Black and ethnic minority people who access the mental health system. So because we don't trust those in authority, we're less likely to see if they give us medication. We're less likely to continue taking our medication or go back for repeat treatment. So that just exacerbates this situation. It's kind of like almost like a revolving door.
There you go.
We would just go in, come out, and because we don't trust what we saw on the inside, we carry on doing what we're doing just to get caught again and put back in. And it's like I said, it's like a revolving door. So the outcomes for us are, looking at it on the whole, I'm sure there's cases of people who go in and manage to seek the proper help and, make their way back to a good recovery. But I think we all know, especially just on the surface, people who go to jail, they tend to come out and end up right back in there, and they will do so for most of their lives until they do something that's too big and where they keep them in there for good. So I think that's the same with the mental health system. We're forced to access it because of, like you said, where like M said, it's that intervention, the community treatment orders. Like, we're forced intervention onto us, but the likelihood of us getting a positive outcome of that is quite low because of those factors that we all highlighted in the previous question.
100%, brother.
Question. So going back to this theory of them thinking that in terms of pain, we've got a higher pain threshold than most people. Do you guys think that it also affects us in terms of the dosage that they give us? Because my understanding is, like, for example, if you are depressed, like, they will have different types of medication and dosage, do they look at that for us, or it's just right? Okay,
That's
let's give you the
interesting.
full whack.
That's a good question.
I'm not implying anything. I'm just wondering.
That's a good question, and something that I've not really ever contemplated with. And I've been in a place where I wanted to speak to somebody, or someone would suggest medications. There's nothing I've ever like considered. But when you flip it like that, that's a good question. And honestly, I don't know. I think our resilience in a culture that we live in, or coming from, our resilience, maybe our tolerance, and I don't know if that will affect. I'm not a scientist. I don't know if that will affect us, our biological state, but our tolerance to the drugs or the doses that we might get might be higher. So that's a very good question to contemplate. I'll be interested what the listener says to that. You know?
It is interesting. An analogy or kind of a question for you guys. You've got a Tasmanian devil, and a little newborn kitten. Which one would you think needs pacifying more than the other? If you had to pacify them both.
Tasmanian devil.
Okay, so if you're a medical professional and you deem someone more out of control,
Wild.
than another person, or you see them as more aggressive and they need pacifying, you're probably going to give that person more of a dosage to meet your levels of comfortability, aren't you?
That's my line of thought. That's why I asked that question, because that's what I was thinking about.
But then that's subjective to whoever you're talking to, then surely.
Yeah, but generally speaking, like I said, generally speaking, if there's a lack of understanding when diagnosis comes, and we know historically, just from life experiences, I'm sure you guys had the same, similar to mine, where people think that you're a certain way when you're actually not. So in the eyes of the medical professional, you're deemed as this black man or woman that is more aggressive, or a word that they like to use, more feisty, or diva-ish or whatever, which ultimately means you've got more energy or whatever it is. You're going to want to pacify that person to make you feel comfortable. So let's raise the dosage. Yeah,
100%.
Investigator effects, isn't it? Or questioner effects.
Yes.
I was just about to add. Sorry, Kay. I was to add something. So let's also take the same principle. You're now in a mental home, right? You've been sectioned. Us man here, you know, they say, "Oh, black man are strong," and everything else. The treatment we also get, if we're having, say, you're having an episode, will be completely different, because they will treat you as this strong, aggressive black man or black woman, whatever else. They will then use maximum force in terms of dosage and in terms of also detaining.
You robbed me, man. You robbed me. You robbed me.
Sorry.
You robbed me, man. It's all blessed. We're all one. We're all one.
Yeah.
You're right. T, you're right. I literally saw something today on Instagram, a picture of one person that is unarmed, who is a black man and potentially cashed in or had a bad check. He had his a police officer have his knee on his neck. I saw that.
Yeah.
And there's another one where this person, I think he killed one person or kidnapped two people and killed one person.
Killed two people and kidnapped one.
And the police officer was giving him a bottle of water or a drink.
I see that.
That's what it is. That's the way you need to look at it. Not for every case. Like, please, people, like, when we speak like this, it's from like a general, which it does impact us, don't get me wrong. So we're not speaking about every individual. I'm not saying that every single person like this, but when we're talking like this from a large scale, that picture says it all. And it kind of filters into what you're trying to say, to like the treatment will be different, won't it? So what you got a police officer's knee on someone's neck, unarmed, hasn't caused danger, like imminent danger to the public or whatever, whether it's the other person that's handcuffed, but they've still got enough care and concern to give that person a bottle of water.
Because it's a
even though they're
narrative.
cuffed.
It's a social narrative. And these social narratives, we are showing you how deadly these social narratives can be. We're showing you how much we can be not only at the bottom rung of society in most, if not all aspects. I haven't met one yet that we're at the top. Let's just say that. I haven't met a social aspect in terms of positive outcomes where we are at the top or even halfway. However, because of this social narrative, even when we are treated, whether good or bad, there's always seems to be a negative twist to it. And that leads to what we're talking about, detention and possible increase of death, whether it's by the hands of the law, hands of the force, hands of society, or by mental aspects, because we've linked emotional well-being to your physical well-being. So this is a very important topic with mental health, man. And I urge people who are listening, if you know someone or if you are showing symptoms of emotional issues, please go and seek professional help. But what I will say as well, please seek help with your loved ones, man. Talk to your loved ones. Talk to those people that care for you. Engage with them. Yeah, we have to. Despite how low you may feel, you have to give every effort to support yourself. And then equally, once you've sorted yourself, or at least got yourself to a position of stability, you can then support another who is unstable. Sorry. Yeah. So this is important, what we're talking about here. And I thank you very much for actually listening to us and us to express our own ways and hear our research, hear our points of view. So what I want to say to wrap this question up before we move on to the prevention side is that there's an aspect of, it's almost as in what Jay said about around the revolving door. Yeah. What happens to us or to people who experience mental health issues? You get detained. We've spoke about how there's disproportionality with those who are detained, and it seems to be those from the Black minority ethnic groups. We speak about how that could be caused by a misunderstanding. And the same misunderstanding which leads to diagnosis and disposal can be dealt with either by mental health services and medical professionals, or equally disproportional when it comes to the legal route in terms of police detention or mental health pathways through the criminal justice system. So I then spoke about as well in terms of Black Caribbean pupils are disproportionately expelled or excluded from schools. Now, regardless of what aspect we're talking around in terms of the life scale, there's always one aspect. You are, if you're taken off the street and put into a detention where you can't escape from, you've been removed. If you're taken out of school because of your behavior is seen as that's extremely aggressive or challenging, you are disproportionately removed. If you go to court and because you act a certain way, you are disproportionately removed in regards to out off the street and into mental health services. Yeah, this according to what's called the Center for Mental Health, is part of this revolving door that we're kind of talking around. Whereas you experience trauma, we've kind of looked into where trauma can come from, whether it's from our home, in our environment, whether it's from a cultural environment, whether it's from a historic environment, or from a current well-being in our environment because of our current status. This trauma can then cause what? Challenging behaviors. These challenges are then what? Misunderstood. Once the challenging behavior has been misunderstood, you are then disposed of or diagnosed, and you are then subject to a restrictive intervention. This restrictive intervention can then also cause additional emotional harm. And what happens when you feel emotional harm? You then experience trauma, which then goes back to challenging behavior, which then goes back to you then must be treated by a restrictive intervention because you're dangerous, you're of harm. You are then put into the restrictive intervention, which then causes more emotional harm. And the circle goes round and round and round and round and round. So how do we break this cycle? How does this cycle stop? How do we get to a position where M said healing, which has never come to us? How do we get ourselves to a position where we're able to open our minds and open our culture and open our manhood? And even females too. When I say manhood, I'm not excluding females. Females too need this as well, to where we can seek professional help. And once we do seek that professional help, we can trust that professional environment to treat us fairly, to treat us equally, to care for us, rather than to dispose of us, rather than to detain us, which, as I said, causes more trauma. So then we get on to the final aspect now. How can we prevent ourselves from being one step away from mental health breakdowns? How?
I think one of the most important thing is, it's probably easier said than done, but to manage our stress. Stress management is probably the most important thing to ensure that we're one step away from mental breakdowns, mental illness. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the stress vulnerability model.
Please
No,
explain.
never heard of that one. Yeah.
So it's the American Psychological Association. Psychology that defines the stress vulnerability model as a theory that a genetic or biological predisposition to a certain mental disorder exists, and psychological and social factors can increase the likelihood of a symptomatic episode. So that's saying in a nutshell that stress could be, or is probably, the greatest factor to bring about an episode that you're genetically or biologically predisposed to when it comes to mental health. One of the main causing factors is stress. So us being able to somehow manage that stress will make sure that we're one step away, or make sure that we're several steps away, from a mental disorder. How we do that, there's different ways. Like Kay spoke earlier, exercise, hobbies, diet. There's a few other ways you can help manage your stress level. But for me, I think that's probably the main thing.
So positive coping strategies, yeah?
Yeah, positive coping strategies.
Seen. Nice one.
For me personally, I back everything Jade has said. In going back a few years, going back a couple months, going back a couple weeks. All those mechanisms there. Me personally, I lent more towards family. Now, when I say family, that doesn't mean blood.
100.
That was my counseling session, whether that be I check in with family twice a week or daily. That's my medication, and we will review every 6 weeks or every 6 months, whichever. That's the way I've gone about doing things. Recently, it has been a thought to maybe, talk to somebody who can be objective. That will be me towards that question of finding a solution. And also, you have to be ready to want to talk about those things. Willing to be vulnerable. It's a hard place to be in, but it's willing to be vulnerable. And I think that's where you can unpick maybe the things that you're not seeing yourself. You're not seeing the signs of, you are one step away from a mental breakdown. Someone else might be able to see that from looking from the outside in. So I think it's a big pill to swallow, and it takes a lot of bravery. But I think just what Jay said just there, that encompasses everything that I've been thinking about, everything that I need to do, and everything that me personally I want to do. And I implore others to do that as well.
Bless up, brother. Bless up. That was powerful, man. Powerful and strong there, man. Would you like to share what you believe we can do to prevent ourselves being one step away from mental health breakdowns?
I don't think you can ever be 100% secure from it, but I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do to make it harder for you to get down that route. None of us are invincible or impervious to physical and mental pain, which trauma can just get you in different ways that you don't even know it can get you, especially if you haven't experienced a certain trauma. And it goes back to our role models podcast about knowing your not known self, of when something happens or traumatic experience happens for the first time, and it just hits you for six. But for the most part, and I just echoing what S and J has said, to add to that is just talking and not being afraid. Like I say this all the time, but I got to the age of 29 where I was like, why am I afraid to like just actually be vulnerable? Like I'm so comfortable within myself to know, like who it's not like it's a reality show where someone's watching me and they're commenting on, oh, he's been vulnerable today. Look, like, so what? I'm a grown man, like, and what I want people to kind of listen and hear and go, you know what? So what? You know, no matter what age you are, what generation you're from, there's still time. There's still time to talk. There's still time to get things off your chest that you want to get off your chest, even if it's not of your direct family members. If you want to speak to someone, like, there's still time. If you feel comfortable to talk to those ones closest to you in your network, then do it. But there's still time to kind of the vulnerability, and this is what I learned very too late in my opinion. Actually, that's a sign of strength, because that's a sign to show that, you know what, you're so aware of yourself that you're willing to kind of put yourself in that place for the betterment not only of yourself but sometimes other people. Yeah, I must stress, it took me a long time to understand that actually being conscious and being comfortable with your whole mental side and other people's is a lot stronger than just disregarding it as just being weak. Don't get me wrong, there are still elements of being weak out there that I'll never kind of co-sign or sign to, but that's a different story and a different podcast. And there's differences between certain conditions and just being, like, for instance, depression isn't being sad. Depression is not normal. It's different from being like just feeling sad for a period of time or a short period of time. So yeah, just talk, find yourself, and be comfortable with yourself. I think that's one of the biggest problems that I haven't had, but I've seen, is that a lot of people are not comfortable, one, with their own company, but two, in their own skin. And if any of those two apply, that needs to be addressed, or you'll never ever fully find a strong percentage of happiness, in my opinion. But that's just my thoughts and opinions. So what about you, Kay?
That's powerful there, man. Boys, you lot really give me blessing to be that I even know you lot, man. Like, honestly, I'm so glad that we crossed paths, and this has been a deep one for me, man. This has been a deep one. I just want to reiterate what Em said. Regardless of your age, don't think because I'm 70 now, this is how I'm gonna be for the rest of my life, blah blah blah. Like, you have to drop that level of pride, man. And if it's gonna help you and those who are around you, who you love, then why not? It doesn't make you any less of a woman, doesn't make you any less of a man. It makes you more of a woman, more of a man, that you can say, you know what? I know I need help. It's okay to admit that. It's okay not to be okay. It really is. We don't have to put on a facade. We don't have to put on a soldier's uniform and pretend we can go through life being a soldier. Soldiers have to rest at some point. Soldiers have to take off their uniform at some point. Yeah.
Soldiers need treatment at some point if they get injured or they can't continue.
100%. And soldiers need training. It's not just good enough just to put on a uniform and go out there. You need training, which means you need help. So yeah, please.
I think like early intervention is always something that helps reduce the likelihood of falling into like psychotic episodes or any mental health illness. Like you said, if you feel away from earlier, you can spot the signs, go seek treatment, go seek help, because the earlier you catch it is the greater chance that you have to do something about it and look forward to a positive outcome. So yeah, talking openly, early intervention. And another thing as well, be aware of it in your family. If your family history has a history of mental health illness, be aware of that. Don't make it a taboo. Learn about it, so then you could identify it within yourself as well and others within your family circle.
Bless, man. Bless.
That's a big one. That's a big one to learn about what your family traits have been. People need to understand that it's not just about having a defect from birth, or you might be predetermined to have diabetes or high blood pressure being coming from a black culture, but it's not just about that. Like I said before, it's not just about the physical, it's the mental as well. Both coincide with each other, both correlate, and both can't live without the other.
100. Yes, people. So I completely co-sign everything what my boys have said here, and I want to bring on another aspect before I wrap this up in terms of prevention. We spoke about how there's a misunderstanding. We spoke about a lack of cultural understanding. We spoke about a disproportionality of being diagnosed and disposed of due to being of a cultural background. So I will flip this on its head and say, people of that same nation who are disproportionately treated and disposed of and diagnosed with mental health issues, if we were in the seats of power, if we were the doctors who get to diagnose, if we were the police who get to police, if we were the court and the judge who get to sentence, maybe we might have a little bit more compassion because we understand the cultural background that person who is disproportionately treated has gone through. We have a same cultural beginning. We have a same ancestral beginning, and we have the same living in environments that we are likely to be born in. So maybe if we become the mental health professionals, maybe when you see that next person who looks like you, who comes from the same background as you, you might naturally have a little bit more compassion. You might, instead of seeing aggression, you see frustration. You might treat them differently. You might diagnose them differently. So I'm going to flip that on its head in that way.
100.
This then links into what is called trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care. Now, I'm saying this can be achieved if that historical trauma was also in the person who was treating you, because they see you as a counterpart rather than someone who's different. So this is called the whole system approach, where it focuses on it focuses on more than just the behavior that is presented, which is usually what happens in diagnosis, which is usually what happens in court, it was usually what happens by police. You are treated by the behavior that is seen. That's not a whole systems approach. I'm talking about going wider than that. So the goal is about reducing harm and promoting well-being. How do we do that? Well, creating a safe and positive environment that is inducive to change. That's the important part. It has to be inducive to change. You have to be able to be born and live in an area and grow up in an area where induction of change is possible. Not that you grew up in an impoverished place and that's how it's going to be for the rest of your life, or not that there's nothing but gangs and street gangs going on around. You have to be part of that. Not that you know that you're not going to be employed because you're going to be seen as, oh, you come from that area, you come from that end, so you're not going to get a job here. Not because they know your last name and they see you and then they ill treat you, BM, because of them that, not because you're the black boy in school, and then you suddenly get your stereotypes where you have to be good at sport and good at music. Not because you come up in a broken home, because you have no cultural background or experience of a home that is stable. You need to have a positive and safe environment that is conducive to change. Point 1. Point 2, reduce the fear of professional support. How do we do that? By having ourselves in that position of giving professional support. If we are always the service users and not those delivering the service, then the disproportionality is likely to remain. So we need to educate ourselves in this field so we can come back with the education and help those that come from our cultural background so we can support ourselves, so we're not put in detention centers and treated by police and by the court systems as having mental health issues. Then you are segregated from society. You can actually treat that person as a person, not as something to be locked away. Then it goes on to the next point, to have reliable attachment figures. Reliable attachment figures. To have figures in your own local society, to have reliable figures in your own society, in your own area, in your own community, where they are positive role models, who are influencing you to do better, who you can see who have tried and they've worked twice as hard, and therefore they've received twice the outcome, twice the pay. That's the problem. We get told from birth, you got to work twice as hard, but we don't get told you also get twice done pay, because you're not. You work twice as hard and you might get the same pay. Might. That needs to change. Point 4, understanding of cultural differences. This links in with point 2. In terms of reducing the fear of professional support. In order to understand cultural differences, those who are already in the field of mental health, of policing, of court system, you can learn too. You have powers that can destroy the survivability of a person. So you have a responsibility to understand every single cultural difference, and even beyond culture, gender, religion. You have a responsibility because you've put yourself in a position where you get to judge people, where you have the power to detain people. So you must educate yourself. The problem is not always with the person that you are diagnosing or sentencing. The problem is you don't feel you need to learn anymore. Your arrogance. That needs to change. And that can also change if we put ourselves and educate ourselves into positions where we get to diagnose. We get to do treatment. Finally, the last one is genuine love and care, man, for the individual over desensitizing treatment. Genuine love and care. When you see that person isn't a patient. It's a person who is a brother or a sister to someone, who might have children, who might be married, who has a mother and father, who has a job, who has hobbies and interests, and have a whole other life outside of what they are presenting with. Remember that. Have that love, care, and affection. They're not just a patient or a number or a piece of paper that you got to get through before the end of the day. Take the time. You're in the service of welfare. Keep that in your mind. Okay. That's a hard one. Whew. Boys, how do you feel about that one? That was a hard-hitting one.
Yeah, man. Covered a lot.
Yes, and
so much more to uncover, but
so much more.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, listeners. We are one step away from where we want to be, one step away from positive outcomes and several steps away from negative outcomes. I want to once again say thank you very much to the viewers for listening. Please, 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 I can't emphasize this enough. Comment, speak to us. We're here. We're interactive. Please subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get this message out there. Please share. We are on 5 different platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. And we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Link in with us. Thank you very much. We are one step away from.